Good afternoon and happy Saturday to each of you that are here with us on Doctor to Doctor in the chat room. We are so happy to have you on this beautiful Saturday.
Yes,
We always appreciate you guys coming back to spend this hour with us as we try to discuss relevant topics that impact our communities and our world. We had a topic on last week. This is a reminder that it is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And we spoke with Miss Veronica Nealy-Morris and Miss Marie McKenzie. And we had what we will consider part one as they shared their stories about their experiences with sexual assault. I will say before we begin the show, and we did not do this on last Saturday. There may be some sensitive content, so keep that in mind if your children are listening on with this subject. We do not have Miss McKenzie back in the chat room, but we are so happy that Veronica was able to join us again because there was so much to talk about and we were not able to finish our discussion on last week. So thank you so much, Veronica, for coming back to talk with us.
Absolutely.
And hello to my co-host, Ms. Nicole. How are you today, ma'am?
I'm doing really well. I'm excited about our topic, which just sounds weird to say, but I'm excited because it is a topic that we really, really need to keep in the forefront of our minds, and that we really just need to have more discussions about. So I'm really, really glad that Ms. Veronica could come back to help navigate us through this topic and find ways to just continue to make it relevant. So I'm glad.
And just the courage, that comes with sharing this type of story. We had begun to talk about the impact on family. And I just feel like we glossed over a lot of things because of time. And we want to just kind of revisit that. You had even said that, you were kind of uptight about some that might be listening to the show and all of that. Tell us where you are with that. And then let's talk about how you feel we can restore those family relationships.
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. I'm Veronica Nealy-Morris. And what I meant was, after doing the show, I felt some kind of way. I felt nervous and scared, and I've been doing this for a very long time. I don't think it's the fact of putting my quote business, unquote business in the street, but this one particular person I'm still protecting, which is my mother. And I don't want the information to get out there because I'm so afraid that we're in a small town and folks say, hey, did you see your daughter such and such? Not to negate that it's true, but you still have a sense to protect, quote, the innocent, unquote. So it's hard. It's still very, very hard. So I understand why people are afraid to tell, but it's very important that we do. Now, let me just say this. I am going to post it. I just had to pray about it and think through it. And each time I do this, you think it gets easier, but it doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't.
Can you say a little more about that? Because I think there are probably, thousands, millions maybe of people out there who are like, I make the conscious choice to choose others' comfortability over my own every time I go home or every time I go to a family function, right? I have made this choice not to tell my truth because I know how uncomfortable it would make everybody else. And in doing that, you aren't really being able to be true to yourself. But can you just talk a little bit about how difficult that is, that tug of war that probably goes on?
And I want to kind of add to that question and make it two-part. Do you have anything in place, whether you've just done it mentally or you've written it down? Do you have things in place that once it's just really out there and you know that it may have a negative impact on some others, as to how you will handle those people, how you will restore, if you will, those relationships?
Absolutely. Those are two very good questions. I'll start out by saying that I'll answer your question first. If the individuals that are offended would come to me and ask a question, it would make it so much easier.
Mm,
Usually happens is that nobody says anything, but you can feel the energy in the room. You
Mhm.
get hints and texts that, I saw that. But if we can, that's the whole thing about let's keep this conversation going and going and going and keep having it. Nobody is saying anything. Everybody is feeling some kind of way, but we're still not discussing and talking about it and
Mm.
understanding that I'm not doing this to point fingers. I'm not doing this to get answers because nobody really can explain. My
Mm.
father, who I asked him directly, he still couldn't even admit to doing it. So we're not looking for answers. This is all about awareness and speaking our truth. Now, let me just say this. When I do post it, and I will tonight, or when I'm able to post this one here, I am going to post it. But I always pray about things before I post it. Even if it hits the person in the wrong way, 1 or 2 or 20 people, it's going to reach 1,000. That's going to be beneficial for. It's an unselfish act because you have to remember, I'm putting my business out in the street. I'm putting my husband, who's married to an abused woman.
Mm.
All of that stuff plays a role. So it's not that easy. When people see me, a lot of times they want to see me as a victim.
mm,
They see me as this little girl. Oh my God, look what she's gone through. And I
Mhm.
always have to redirect the conversation. Yes, I went through that, but it doesn't define who I am. The reason why I'm able to talk about it today is because I'm working through it, and it's a working process. You said, are there any tools or different strategies in place when that conversation occurs? Yes, I'm going to tell the truth. I've always been straightforward. The truth of the matter is it happened. So let's discuss it. I don't want to know if you were aware of it because if you say yes, it's not going to change anything. If you say no, it's not going to change anything.
interesting.
But
Mhm.
try to understand where I'm coming from, understand my intentions, that it is not to hurt or harm. I know what that feels like, but to educate families and society
And to
on what
heal.
and to heal. It's
Mhm.
so unselfish on my behalf. I didn't want to get on television or media or radio and have this discussion about my private business, but
Mhm.
it was necessary and it is a part of my healing process. Like I say, it is a process. What do I do? You mentioned, was there something that I had in place? I believe that, I'll have that direct conversation and I don't mind crying. I'll cry in a heartbeat. You have to use all your emotions that God gave you. So
Mhm.
it's okay to cry while you're having this conversation. It's okay to say, I don't understand. I had a conversation with a young lady today. Her father was a monster. He molested her throughout her whole life, and she's struggling today because she won't forgive.
Mm.
Other sister had a great relationship with her father, and he's quote gone to glory because he was a minister. I'm just gonna say that he's gone to glory. I've never heard a pastor say anybody go to hell, but everybody going to
Yeah.
glory. They don't have a good relationship because she has that relationship with her father, who was a good father. The other sister has a relationship with doesn't have a relationship, and what they need to do is come together and say, hey, even with me and my sisters, I can't imagine dad did this, but I believe you because it's true. I
Mm.
am so sorry, sis, you went through that. I didn't have the same experience, but I'm here for you. And try to be more sensitive when you're raving about what a great father you had.
Mm.
Understand how I'm feeling, and then
Mm.
we try not to go in that direction. And if I see that maybe I'm saying something bad about my dad, and I look at my sister and see you could the nonverbal, I
Yeah.
love her enough to say, you know what, let's back up. But let's keep talking about it. It's not a blame, it's the truth. Sis, I can't even imagine. Oh, I do remember when such and such. So you got to have those hard, difficult conversations. And there is no perfect way of doing it. Each
Mhm.
relative or relationship or individual, there's a different, you have to know that person and you have to talk about it until you get tired of talking about it. Why am I doing this? Because I don't want this to happen to anybody else. For years, I wouldn't go to family outings, and some family members thought I was being standoffish. It
Mm-hmm.
was, I had anxiety attacks. I couldn't get in my car and drive. I would run out of gas week after week because I did not know how to drive on the other side of the road. If the gas station wasn't on the side of the road that I was traveling,
Wow.
anxiety gripped me because it just seemed like I had so far to go. I had everything safe planned out. I
Mm.
knew how to do it. Any changes in my life, even though I looked like I had it together, would devastate me. So we have those conversations. That's why even my daughter's graduation, I went to her graduation only because I didn't want people to say, "Oh, you didn't go to your daughter's graduation." But I was dying there, and her
Mhm.
last happened to be Neely, so she wasn't at the front of the line. It was like 1,000 A's and B's and C's. I was doing my ABCs, but I was dying. The minute they called her name, I left. She
Mhm.
couldn't find me. It wasn't that I didn't want to be there. I was dying, holding my breath. And I had these difficult conversations. I would have loved for my daughter to be on here with me, because like she said to me, "Mom, if you hadn't been straight honest with me, you and I would not have had a relationship today, because I thought you were just crazy. I thought you didn't love me."
Wow.
That is so not just, I hate interesting seems just not enough, but
Mhm.
really profound when you talk about, when you are being traumatized by someone
Mhm.
and someone else has this beautiful relationship with them. And you have to hear, all of these great things
Mhm.
about
Mm.
them and their character, but you know what they're doing to you.
Wow.
Um, it's really, oh, I'm looking for the right word, because Dr. Nicole and I, Dr. Nicole and I just had this conversation.
Yeah.
We just had it. And I always think about how divinely orchestrated, things can be. And to me, this is one of them. And sometimes, depending on other folks' circumstances or whatever, they can articulate it so much better, you know. Maybe Nicole and I might have been talking about how, folks think they're all this and that, but I know, but when you articulated it, what I'm saying, it really
Yeah.
made it make even more sense, because it's not that you're being petty. It's not that you don't want people to like certain folks or whatever, but just don't expect me to
Mhm.
want to be subjected to them.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm realizing that now, but when you're going through it, you don't have the verbiage or the understanding why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And you're jealous to some degree.
Mm.
Why
Mm.
do you have a relationship? Because I know, like, one of my sisters, and I won't call their names, my father was an independent truck driver. He had like a slew of 18 wheelers, and they would go to Miami and she would stay the night with him. And I'm confident that he didn't molest her. So you think as a child, why me and not her? And
Yeah.
then you, well, if you molested family members,
Mm-hmm.
then why, as a parent, would you let that child go? I can answer that. I was in Lady Lake one year speaking at the villages here, in Orlando, here in Florida. And a 80-year-old woman stood up and she said, "Veronica, what kind of mother are you?" Initially, I was going to pop off, but you have to be open to all the questions, because she said, "How could you?" Because I left my daughter at my parents' house at the age of probably 3 up until she was like 5 years old, because I just didn't have that maternal instinct. I mean, I could have walked away from my daughter and never looked back, because there was no motherly connection. Not that I was a bad person, but I disconnected and shut down all my emotions in
Yeah.
survival mode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that's what it was, but after I did the work through the years, I understand what it was. And the only reason why I went and got her, because I clearly heard God, and that's something I've always heard, the voice of the Lord. I heard him say, and he sounds like me, "Go get her or you're going to lose her." And I didn't want to, but I didn't want to lose her. I wanted to make sure that I was that mother for her. But this lady said, "What kind of parent are you? You
Mm.
mean to tell me that you're going to leave your daughter with an abuser?" And it's like I felt the sense of God. And it's like, that's a great question. I never even thought of it. It never even crossed my mind that she would be abused. I was in survival mode.
Mhm.
So that's why I don't judge people for what they do.
Mm,
That's why we have to continue educating folks to let them know, listen, you're not alone. There are so many different emotions and things that you go through when you've been abused. It's so far reaching that it is unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
So we have maybe about 3 minutes before break, and I really want to ask this question, but I think we need to leave it, we need to leave enough space and time. So maybe we can ask this one out after the break. But instead, can you talk about how this affected your relationship with food, your academic performance, and even your mental health?
Sure. Did you want to start the conversation on this end and then finish it on the other end, or?
Yeah, because that the question I wanted to ask, we'll ask after the break, but this one I think we might be able to tackle in a few minutes. But
can I ask though, before we even leave that, and this
Mhm.
may even help it a little with time a little bit. Can I ask, after you reunited with your daughter and you guys have, bonded or, gained a relationship with each other, um, were you eager to know if she had any problems with molestation or anything, after you realized the situation that she had been in?
Well,
Mhm.
my daughter is what, 5'6", probably 98 pounds soaking wet. She's
Mm-hmm.
always been a raider. So she's always back. I always say she took after her daddy's side of the family, very vocal. So if anything had occurred, I got her when I was like 5 years, when she was like 5 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
it took a lot of work and talking and communicating. And I didn't tell her everything when she was that young.
Sure.
Maybe when she was in her maybe 20s, that's when I started saying, this is why I did that. I
Mm.
remember her watching the movie, The Bastard in Carolina. Have you seen that movie?
I have not.
She came up to me and she said, "Mom, that's you."
Mm-hmm.
That's when I knew I needed to do work and really have an open, raw conversation with her on anything that she asked. And she could have asked as often as she wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's great that, and I think that what you just said is important too, because you do kind of know your kids, right? You get to learn things about them, and I look at my grandkids and I can tell which ones are vocal and which ones, like, you better not, because they're gonna tell it. And I'm so grateful, right? We can talk about later how to filter that. We can talk about later, but right now, tell it, right? Tell
Yeah,
me
yeah.
everything you need to tell me. We'll fix that. We'll fix that part later. I think we might be at a break.
Mm.
And we are going to go to break and come back and continue our discussion with Ms. Veronica Nealy-Morris on this topic of sexual assault awareness. We want to, as Dr. Nicole said, keep this at the forefront, things like this rather at the forefront, because it is so important, that we as parents, as guardians, understand how to protect our children. We will see you on the other side of break right here on 94.7 FM.
And we're back. Thanks for hanging out with us on this Saturday. We are here with Veronica Nealy-Morris. This is part 2 of our discussion on how to keep our children safe when it comes to sexual assault, sexual violence. Veronica, tell us kind of what your thoughts are on how we can keep our children safe, what we need to do to foster the kind of environment where they feel comfortable telling us about, things that have happened. Like, what are some things that parents need to know and hear, so that they can prevent something like this maybe from happening to their child?
Absolutely. Educate and communicate. If
Uh,
we educate our children, not just on child abuse prevention and awareness, but educate them on who they are, their value, their worth,
mm-hmm.
a relationship, a safe place for that child. You can't wait until they get a 16, 17 years old and start having this conversation. They should feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
respected to come to you. So it starts very young. When that child falls down, grab that kid and let her know just or let him know just how important he is. So I say educate
Yeah.
and communicate is key. And that's key to any relationship. You know, as Christians, we talk about having a relationship with God. In order for us to have a relationship with Him, it must be a two-way dialogue. We have to communicate and then we have to listen. We have to be all in, even with our children, when we're listening to them. Take
Mm-hmm.
their feelings into account. And that means spending time with them. So that's any relationship, you have to do that. So educate and
Yeah.
communicate.
Yeah. I had
And
heard, go ahead, Dr. Shaw.
well, I was just gonna ask, just an extended version of that question. How do we even convince the grown-ups to listen? It is a two-way dialogue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes people just don't want to accept that these things are so.
Mm-hmm.
How do we, what can we even do about that? We watch the movies and I mean, by the time sometimes that parents are on board and there's buy-in, so much has happened. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um,
You're absolutely right about that. You see that brown, dark skinned, cute girl in the back of me on that picture?
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
That that I was, I think, about 9 or 10 years old, and you wouldn't believe how many people say you were molested. I put that picture up there because people that look like me get molested. If you look at television and media advertisement, all the little, none of the girls really look like that. They're the little fluffy hair and the cute kids. So
Mm.
people were actually surprised that I was molested.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. But
Yeah.
you have, first of all, I think everybody knows that live in this world that have their senses know that this stuff is going on. But we only want to hear about it when it's a Joyce Meyer. I remember a family member telling me about Joyce Meyer's story. Have you guys heard that or do you know who Joyce
Yeah.
Meyer? And they were like, oh my God. And I was devastated because we want to hear about the celebrities, the poor celebrities. But when it comes to a regular person like myself and millions of others, we don't want to hear it. We want
Wow.
to hear about some cute little girl. And of course, all of our children are boy. Then we want to talk about it. So the ones that want to know, want to grow, they're going to educate themselves. There are resources. You can go on YouTube or anywhere. The information, there's a script in the Bible that says that in the past time, God frowned on ignorance. He tolerated ignorance, but there is no reason for us to be ignorant. If we're ignorant because we want to be. The Me Too, all of that stuff. You hear the family because many family members are talking about it, but they're not doing anything about it. So we're talking about it, but we're talking to the wrong people. And then after you talk about it, then you have to be willing to do something. I mean, most of us, if we're professionals, we are mandatory reporters. So
Mm-hmm.
it's our duty, it is our job to do such.
Yeah. I remember going to a sexual assault training years ago, and they really stressed the importance of telling kids the proper names of our body parts. Um, and they shared a story about this little girl who her grandmother, called it her cookie or something. And when she did go to talk to her mother and grandmother about something that had happened to her cookie, the grandmother thought she was literally talking about a cookie. And so she didn't even pay attention to it and just, thought the little girl had, talked about something, a cousin or somebody who dropped the cookie or ate the cookie or took the cookie or something, but the grandmother did not understand what this little girl was trying to tell her, that she had been molested. because they didn't give her the proper names for her body parts, and she was calling it a cookie. And so they really stress the importance of like, we have to tell our children what the names of these body parts are, and we have to not be ashamed to educate them on their body parts, because it will prevent something like that from happening. And that was the first, I mean, this was years ago, but that was the first time that I had heard it explained that way. And I think a lot of parents kind of shy away from using those words because for some reason we think they're bad words or something, or we teach kids that they're bad words. But I was just wondering your thoughts on whether or not you think we need to be giving kids the proper names for all of our body parts.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the illustration you gave is a prime example. We are afraid to say the word penis. We're afraid to say the word vagina because we deem that dirty.
Yeah.
We have to, I'm 56 years old. If I said those words to my parents, I would have got in big trouble because they would have thought I was this monster kid. But it is important to say, because when you do report it, if you say somebody is touching my vagina, you know that's not a cookie.
That's right. Yeah.
Even when you go to the authorities and you're telling the police officer, whoever, someone touched my cookie, they really don't have anything to go on. But when you clearly say a vagina, they know what it is. And you have to teach these kids that these are not bad words. This is make a game out of it. These are the anatomy. This is what this is. This is what that is. But we have to take the time to do it, because I didn't do that raising my child. I'm learning as I go because I got around people that were having those conversations. And yes, a lot of the resources have been out there for years, but I'm just going to say my background growing up in the Pentecostal church, and I'm sure a lot of other churches, that we would never even attend a abuse class. We didn't even attend sex education. Anything that started with an S and an E, forget the X, that was deemed disrespectful. So we didn't avail ourselves. We got to do better. We as Christians, we're the last one to be on board when it comes down to computer educating, whatever it is. We got to be on the forefront of this thing.
And you were talking about, people did not think you would have been the little girl that was molested. We can't get inside the brains of a predator, but I would think that they look for, not so much as how a little girl is looking, but more so about the little girls that they feel like they can mostly influence, they can mostly groom. When I say little girls, I mean little girls and little boys, who can they really groom or whatever. So I don't think there is this face, of sexual assault. Like every little girl is gonna look like this, every little boy is gonna look like this. It's probably
how society deems beauty. I mean, who would molest a girl that looked like that? I got that so many times, almost like her.
You mean society? Okay, I think I cut you off and I didn't hear. Wow.
Yes, society. It's just like, what does abuse look like?
Yeah. Wow.
There is no face to it.
There isn't.
It's like AIDS, when the AIDS epidemic. What does AIDS look like? There's no face to it. At the
tell me what that question does to you as an adult woman who is, on a healing journey from this thing that happened to her that she had no control over. Tell me what the question of who would do that to you, tell me what that does to somebody who has gone through something so horrific.
Well, what it does now, my heart goes out to the individual that would make a comment like that. I feel bad for them. When I was younger, I believed it. I mean, who would? So it wasn't, I didn't question it, I believed it. But if a person would have that comment today, I would actually feel bad for them, and I wouldn't get upset. I would educate them. Well, what should she look like? What should she look like? So no, I wouldn't, because now I know ignorance is ignorance. So I wouldn't get upset or anything like that.
If you could talk to that little girl on that picture behind you.
Now you're going to make me cry. And that's okay. I talk to that little girl all the time because I'm still that little girl to some degree.
Yep.
I let that little girl know, if you hang in there, you're gonna make it. You're gonna make it. You're gonna grow up to be a fabulous person. You're gonna be able to encourage other people. This is just something you're going through. It's not going to define you. And I said this earlier before the show. I don't mind crying, because that's an emotion that God gave me. And I want to tell this short story. There was a lady, I'm a respiratory therapist by profession, and there was this lady who didn't have any tear ducts. She was born without tear ducts, and nobody was aware of it. So anytime she felt some kind of emotions, whether it was at a funeral or whatever, she would just burst out laughing. And it ostracized her, because her family and her friends thought she had a devil or a demon, because how are you going to laugh at a funeral? It wasn't until she was about 80 years old she was diagnosed ductless. So
Wow.
she told me, make sure whenever you feel the emotions, you use them, because God didn't give it to you for no reason. So when I cry because I'm still amazed at the sovereign power of God to deliver me and many others to get us to this point. It's not about what we went through, because we all have a story. I'm just sharing mine. I believe that I was born for such a time like this. I know God did not cause it, but because we free will agents, evil in the world. But he says that I know the plan that I have for you, that of good and not of evil, to bring you to this is amazing end. Veronica, and her real name is Esther. Esther, you're going to be okay.
Wow. That's beautiful. So maybe let's go back to that question that we didn't have quite enough time to tackle earlier. You talked a little bit about how this impacted your parenting and your ability to connect with your daughter. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it impacted other relationships, relationships with food, or with your academic performance, your mental health? Can you tell us a little bit about how this impacted all of that?
It affects every area of your life, areas that you're not even aware of. But my relationship with food, food was my best friend. Food never judged me. I remember growing up, I was always hungry. And I think now that it was anxiety. So there was this person that lived next door to us. I will call her name. She would I guess, buy cakes from the store. And then once the expiration date, she would put it in the trash can. And I would watch that lady, and I would go to that trash can, and I would grab that food, and I would run on our trailer, and I would just eat it. So I've always struggled with food. I've always struggled with weight. I've been able to maintain it, but I think about it every single day of my life on what I'm going to eat. I've always felt hungry, and I ate just because anytime I got nervous, I was a nervous eater. Again, I've maintained myself, and I know how to control it now, but I've always had a bad relationship with food. I've always said, God, if you just give me the ability to eat to live and not live to eat. And if you look in the body of Christ, most of us have a poor relationship with food. And it's all about discipline. When I was able to pull down and figure out what it was discipline, all about discipline. But I couldn't connect with anything, even when I was married. This is my second marriage. My first marriage, we got married young, and I grew up. He's a very nice person. We're friends today. But when I grew up, I was never able to connect because I was still in survival mode. I'm connected to my husband now. I can exhale. But I was in survival mode just in case it didn't work. I didn't want to die. So I always kept one foot out the door saying, if we don't make it, I'm still going to live. So I've always been resilient. So it affects every relationship. And I went through a phase where I only would wear name brands because that made me feel like I was somebody. Academically, I thought I was, let's say I got my bachelor degree. On the journey of getting it, I thought it was impossible. But once I got it, I thought everybody did it. So I wasn't smart. I always thought I was dumb and stupid and all of those things. And I would hear those voices in my head. And I created the A to Z affirmation that I do every day, even up until this moment. I say my ABCs every morning. Veronica, you are able, you're bold, you're courageous, you're fabulous, you're dynamic. If you do your A to Z affirmations, by the time you get to Z, you're ready for the world. I do that every morning. Paul says if you can't find anybody to encourage you, you encourage yourself. I took the word of God, and I took God at his word. I remember I have a chapter in my book I talk about, I wanted to be delivered so bad, and all I heard was just eat the word of God, hallelujah. So I took an old Bible, because remember, years ago, you could not throw away a leaf of the Bible. I don't care how ragged that Bible was, you could not throw away God's word. So what I did was I wanted to be an obedient Christian, because I never turned my back on God. I never didn't think he was real.
Mm-hmm.
He was my source. I started eating pages from the Bible. Did it deliver me? No. I became constipated and I eventually stopped eating the word.
Wow.
Yeah.
My title of my first book was all jacked up. You see why I had that title.
Yeah. You know, and it's we talk about this on the show a lot too. You know, I love the Lord too, and I believe in his word. I stand on his word. Yet I know that it's okay for us to need help, and we cannot just pray things away. I mean, and if we're gonna stand on his word, then you know, faith without works is dead. We got some leg work to do, you know, in these various situations, and you're doing the work. I'm just so very proud of you.
Yeah.
You're doing the work.
And
Yeah.
I think
And you're showing others that the work can be done.
Yeah.
And I love the affirmation thing. I don't see it as, you know, somebody else might say, oh, she's just trying to convince herself that, you know, that she's okay. No, like you really are.
the Bible says faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God, right?
Yes, it does.
Faith and fear comes by way of the same highway.
Mm,
We believe more about what we say, about those conversations that we're having with ourselves. We believe that more so what other people are saying. Other
mhm.
people may start the conversation, but we're constantly rehearsing that conversation. So why not tell yourself you're beautiful?
Yeah.
Why not say that you're fabulous, you're able, you're capable? You're only repeating what the word says. Most of us really don't know how to rightly divide the word of truth, because
Mm,
the Bible clearly says that we are to build. The word is our foundation, and we stop there. He
Mhm.
said we're going to build upon that foundation. He also says, in the multitude of many counselors, there is safety. So he has placed people in the earth to counsel and help us humanly guide us through it. And
Yeah.
we just have to adhere to it and do the work.
Wow.
Even in the
oh,
Bible, when he says, I'm going to give you this land, I'm going to give you all the land as far as your eye can see, right? And then it says that you're going to have to possess it. What do you think that means? It's available to you, but you got to go and possess it. So
Yeah.
freedom is available to all of us. Salvation initially is free to us.
Mm-hmm.
In order for us to experience everything that's a part of that salvation package, we got to do some work.
we gotta own it. We gotta
You
possess it.
got to own it. Absolutely.
We are at another break, and I want to talk a little more about that freedom when we return after this break. We will be right back on Doctor to Doctor in the chat room on 94.7 FM.
We're back. Thanks for sticking around. We're here with Miss Veronica Nealy-Morris, talking about a really serious topic. And before we went to break, Veronica, you were telling us, you know, as you describe what you went through and your healing, I think both Dr. Shaw and I feel really amazed and inspired at just how you have overcome, how you have used this to help other people. And it's just something that in my mind, when I think about this, I'm like, I don't know how someone would overcome something so big. You talked a lot about just, you know, going to, you know, counseling and prayer and being in the word. What would you say to someone who is listening, who is at that place where they're like, I don't know how to do this. I can't do this. This is bigger than me. this has ruined my life. Like, what advice do you have for somebody who is stuck and can't move forward?
Great question. I would say to that individual, you're right where you need to be. There are so many resources out there. You don't have to do it by yourself. There's somebody that can grab your hands and walk you through the process, but you must be willing to do what they instruct you to do. You have to be vulnerable. You're gonna cry. You're gonna. When I went to counseling, I was like, I feel like old, ugly, black, nappy-headed, needed, greasy head. Just everything. He let me do that for hours, just using those terms. And then the next time I went there, that sounded funny. And then he started giving me words. How are you feeling? Then he gave me like a list of words. How are you feeling? Look up those words. I'm feeling jealous. I'm feeling overwhelmed because the Bible, there's a story in the Bible, I'm gonna have to throw the Bible in there. There's a story in the Bible where this guy's go to get a healing and he had his hand behind his back and the Lord says, show me where you're hurting. So I have to be able to find how do I help you? I'm feeling anxious. Why are you feeling anxious? Start journaling. Every time I do ABC, I feel anxious. It's a process. And it may not take you 20 years. It may take you 5 years or 2 years, but it's always a process. And you have to reward yourself on the steps that you made. It's not about for anybody else. It's for you. And then you wake up one day free. And freedom feels like a ton of bricks are off your shoulder. Literally, the world got brighter.
When did you start to feel free, Veronica? We were going to ask you that before we talked about that before we left. This freedom thing, I'd love for you to continue to talk about how freedom feels. But when did you start to feel it? Like, at what point, when something so severe happens to you, is it when you start to talk about it? Like, when do you start to feel free?
I don't think there's a place and a time. You realize you're free after you walk into that freedom. I can't tell you a date or I can't tell you a time. It's like I woke up free. I would probably say it's small areas of freedom. I mean, I'm still being freed, but there's so many things that you're free from, like free from the opinion of man. I'm very authentic of who I am. So it's not that one thing because there's so many different things that is involved with child abuse, but you got levels of freedom, like levels of success. I'm still going. I would say I am going to I got free of wearing I can wear short sleeves now because I could never wear short sleeves because remember, I grew up Pentecostals and Christians didn't show their arms. So it's very rare you see me with short sleeves. So when I'm going on vacation, I'm going on cruises, I got on long sleeves. I'm hot, but I got on short sleeve. So I told my husband, this time I'm going to wear me some short sleeves. I'm just going to get all radical and wow, wear me some short sleeves. So there's levels of freedom. It's just like salvation. You're working out your own salvation every day. There's areas in your life you don't even know that you need to be free from. But I would say the most powerful thing in the world when I was free from myself and free from the opinion of others, because everything is inside of me. It's like the Bible says, the kingdom of heaven is not outwardly, it's inside. So when you become free inside, you're free.
Wow.
And it's beautiful. It feels, you're not afraid to try anything. You're not afraid to fail. You're not afraid to get it wrong. It's beautiful. And when you're free, everybody around you can see that freedom. People say to me today, Veronica, what is your secret sauce? Being authentic, laughing at myself, not being serious about not knowing. And when I don't know, say, I have no idea. I spoke with IT today, and this individual was very rude. Like, you're a respiratory therapist, you don't know it. I'm like, no, speak to me like I'm a third grader. I don't even spell it out for me. When we ended that conversation, this person was beautiful. And use you like that because you don't know it. If you can't teach something on a third grade level, you don't know it. Tell me what that red thing is, that thingamajig right there, that blue thing. Tell me what that is.
That. And if you can't, you want to be a know-it-all, but if you can't teach it on a third grade level, you don't know it.
Or you can say, I have no idea, but let's try to find out. I'll say that all the time to my patients. Hold on, let me ask my supervisor, what's her name? Google?
Yeah. I love it.
But it's about being freedom. Christ died so that we can be free. There are areas you don't have to be abused to go through some of these things. That's just my story. There are people that are gripped with anxiety. Anxiety, I say this today, that was the hardest thing, having anxiety. Because noise, any movement, any change, if I had to cross, like let's say I'm driving in the car and I had to cross lanes, I couldn't do it. If somebody got in front of me, it was a panic attack. What the
Wow.
heck is that car doing? But this is a silent killer.
Yes,
But
and there are so many, you're right, and they're not necessarily in the same categories, they're not the same level of severity, but children are being abused in so many ways. It may not even be physical. It could be,
and I think verbal is worse.
yeah, it may be neglect. I think that's bad too, when your parent neglects you. You know, when they make differences, it's all kinds of things that happen that people, grown folks, are still dealing with those abuses of their childhood, you know, and some of them, you know, there's still a lot of shame associated with those, even though they weren't sexual abuse or whatever, because depending on the situation, you know, can't bring shame to the family. You just, you know, you got to just carry the weight. You're not supposed to say anything. You just got to carry the weight. So you're absolutely right. This is your story, but there are many, many others.
Absolutely. Let me just share this. We eventually got separated, some family members, right? We went to different people's homes. And I remember, and I have this in my book, I remember being dropped off in this state, and it was three of us. And one of my aunties said, she's a black one. And everybody picked the bright skinned sisters.
Wow.
And I knew they picked the bright skinned sisters. So I had a huge issue with my skin complexion. As a matter of fact, I started bleaching because I wanted to be called a red bone. Man, when you're from a small town, they call you a red. So I'm sure you've heard that.
Yep.
You've been called a red bone. You can have 4 eyes, and if you're a red bone, you're the hottest thing there. So I wanted to be called a red bone. So I started bleaching myself. And I became two-tone. Now imagine all jacked up and you two-tone. I told God, if you turn my skin back to regular color, I would never do that again. I'm not ashamed of those stories. I mean, they pay a lot for me to tell these stories. So it's my journey. But when I was you hear family members saying, oh, that's the cute bright skinned one. That's the cute dark skinned one. So it's just so many different levels. So I thought I was ugly for years. That little girl in the back, her name is Esther. My real name is Esther. I hated that name. I hated it because the only Esther I knew about was Esther on Fred Sanford.
Yeah.
And if you remember her, I thought she was ugly back then because she was dark skinned. She was a fake Christian because she would go, oh, glory, and then she'll curse the next day. Many she left the room, all of her friends would talk about her. So I saw myself as Esther. I hated it. Then I read the Bible. And this girl named Esther, she was so bad, she took Vashti's husband. They were divorced. So I coined this here. If I perish, let me perish, but I'm going to be delivered. And that's what I stood on. And I'm here today because of that. And then I created my coaching model from my name, Esther. E, evoke and evolve. S, spiritual awareness, because you have to know that there's a spiritual component of you. I'm not going to tell you who to claim as your spiritual component, but Jesus Christ is mine. The Holy Spirit is mine. There's truth and transparency. You have to be true to yourself. Then you get education. I'm working on my PhD in philosophy because I want people to think, right? There's education. You don't have to do traditional university education. There's education. You go to YouTube, you can take classes. There's no reason for ignorance. And then, and only then, comes the R, radical transformation. In the Bible, it never says, be ye changed. Because when you change from a thing, you always revert back to that place. It says, be you transformed. Meaning your
That's right.
Everything about you has changed. If you take a caterpillar and a butterfly, they got the same mom and daddy, right? Family members. But once that caterpillar evolves into a butterfly, they don't even hang out together no more. They don't even eat the same foods. They don't even socialize with each other. There's nothing wrong with the caterpillar. It's perfect in its own right. But at the same time, the butterfly can't even associate with them. So when you do the work, you don't change, you are radically transformed into a whole new creature.
Wow. So I'm looking at this picture of this little girl that you just told us about. And what I see is a beautiful little girl, beautiful smile, beautiful complexion, beautiful skin.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, what should she have heard from somebody for her to believe that she was beautiful? Because I think there's, millions of little brown girls running around not believing that they are worth it, that they are beautiful, that they're smart. And is it because we aren't telling them that enough? Like, what was it that was missing?
I don't think it's necessary. Let me just say, are you guys familiar with Tay Diggs?
Mm-hmm.
He brought back black. So
Mm-hmm.
black is in now, dark skin is in. And then with Wakanda, oh my God.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I think a lot of the brown girls know that they're beautiful. It wasn't the things that folks said to me. It was the things they didn't say.
Ah.
It made me feel. So you don't have to say anything, just like you don't have to say you're Christian, you just be Christian.
Mm-hmm.
It's about showing affection. I'm big on touching. You
Yeah.
got to touch. Touch therapy is so powerful. I can't tell you how many patients that are so mean when I walk in there and I don't even know how to slip their hands and it just melts them down. So it's about not necessarily what you're saying, but those nonverbals. Children feel and they know when there's something wrong. They do. So it's like Marie said, if that child don't want to be around uncle or auntie, there's a reason. You don't have to say anything, just watch.
Yep.
So it's not always what we say. It's just like our spouse. My husband can say he loves me every day, but it's how he treats me. It's those nonverbals. It's the things that he does for me. But we got to start it early. But this is the thing. You give out of what you know to do. I didn't have that in me. What the Bible says, we give according to what's in us. And when it talks about we're supposed to love our neighbors like ourselves, we are doing that. We just don't love ourselves. That's why we can't love a neighbor. I have enough love to spread to everybody now because I love Veronica. I'm perfectly imperfect.
Wow.
When you were going through this in your home as a little girl, were you withdrawn from, or the family in any way, or were you just kind of going along to get along? Were you blended in, just doing everything the family was doing, and then you just had to deal with what you dealt with?
I think you don't even think that far. It's just a way of life. You just I mastered the art of making myself disappear. Doing those acts, I could just disappear. I wasn't there. Like I said, it wasn't the penetration part, it was the vulgar words. After the fact, it was the shampoo that was used that you're having this burn. It was just crazy stuff. But I just thought that was a way of life. I knew it was, I hated it, but I just knew it was a way of life. So you just did the only time I felt peace is when my father went out of town. But the minute he hit that Henry County line, I could feel him coming back. So there's that panic attack again. So you enjoyed those moments that he was gone, but you knew when he got back, it was your turn.
Wow.
You knew that. And you hated it, but you were kind of glad when it was over because you knew you had at least a week to just be normal. So that was just absolutely normal. You didn't talk about it. You didn't want anybody to see you crying because what were you going to say? Then you ended up fighting your siblings because now they're saying, oh, you're crying. And you're like, I'm not crying. So it was a crazy cycle. So you're not thinking that. You look back and you're like, oh, this is why that happened. Oh, this makes sense. And when you asked the question earlier about my daughter, I watched her. I was observing. I was a parent that paid attention to everything. And
Tell
it was
us I'm sorry.
I remember my child who, when she got her menstruation, I think I beat her because I thought she was being fast. The first time I saw hair under her arms, I was devastated because I thought she was being fast. Because back then everybody was fast, and she was just turning and growing. And eventually, I heard God say, "Okay, you keep it up," because and I love everybody. Girls like girls too, so you better start introducing this girl and letting her talk to guys and be comfortable so she won't be boy crazy. This is my thing. If you really want to know, God will reveal it to you some kind of way. A lot of my things that I've learned wasn't through the church. These was through non-Christians. This was through, as we say, secular people. This was through people that believed in something else. This is how I got here. because to me, church kept me stuck. Church kept me, and I'm blood bought now. Church kept me coming to the church on Wednesday to get laid hands on it, but it didn't teach me. Okay, once you get somebody prayed for you, then you still have to go to that counseling. You have to work it through.
Mm-hmm.
So I was forced to do that because I was exhausted. And when you get tired, you're going to do what you need to do, or you're going to make a step. And when you make that step, there's always going to be one person there to take you to the next path. And the trick is to know when that relationship is over and you have to go to the next one. So God will guide you in a way only you know that that's Him.
Mm-hmm. We are definitely out of time, but I want you to tell the audience again about your books before we go.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Veronica Nealy-Morris, and I'm the author of It's a Process. It's a book about my journey. Also, I have a dream journal. You can find it on Amazon or any place that they sell books.
Thank you, Veronica. And we know that you're not going to be a stranger here. We look forward to having you, and we will definitely be reaching out to you and Marie. We thank you guys for coming back as you do each Saturday, and we ask that you come back next Saturday, same chat channel, same chat time, right here on Dr. the Doctor in the chat room on 94.7 FM. We will see you then.